Yeah. How are we looking?
We need to get going. First load picks up here about a couple hours here, so toss everything on board and we'll take off. My name's Theodore J. Braismer. I've been a driver, a semi-driver, for the last 5 years. I got my CDL back in 2010 and then was forced to take a break for a while. Uh, Had a death in the family that kind of hit me kind of hard and took about a year or so away from driving, and then back in 2013 I got back behind the wheel and been driving ever since.
How would you describe life on the road?
Well, each day is a different roll of the dice on what could happen between the traffic conditions, the weather. You can check the weather as much as you want, but Mother Nature will do her own thing. And same thing with traffic. One minute, Google Maps may say, yeah, it's all clear through there, but then you get a couple of four wheelers that'll, you know, think it's bumper cars, and now the highway's shut down for a while.
How about, and seeing as we're in the Quad Cities now, before the trip starts, how do you see the Quad Cities as a location within the United States? Where do you see its place between the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest? How does it fit into the whole country now that you've driven around it? You've seen a lot of what it has to offer. How would you describe Quad Cities' place?
If anything, I'd say I-80s, or the Quad Cities, with where it's placed on I-80, is kind of like the heart. You know, if you kind of take a look at it from a map wise, how it has the little figure eight type deal, and it's pretty much right there in the middle of the Midwest. You know, it's the halfway point between Chicago and the halfway point to Des Moines, Iowa. You know, uh, it's granted you could blink and you're through the town, but at the same time, she has a few things for drivers here. Whether you're stopping in Milan or stopping at one of the truck stops in Davenport. Got a lot of memories of this place. Um, One of, like I said, with the family being out here, coming out here with my brother. I've been coming here all my life, ever since I was a little kid. The family would come out here to go camping for the weekend and come out here like Friday, set up the tents and all.
How about the Native American presence here in Rock Island?
Well, the main one was like Chief Blackhawk, which they have a state park named after him in Rock Island, Blackhawk State Park. An old wise tale that I've heard a few different times where supposedly Chief Blackhawk had blessed the area to protect it, and since then the area never had any tornadoes that touched down. We've had a couple of touchdown, north of I-80 in Davenport, Iowa, and some south of the area, but never in the metro itself.
When you were in school, did you know what you wanted to do as a career early on, or was trucking something you came to eventually?
Well, I did have a fondness for semis, but I also had huge fondness for computers too, and I tried to go to Blackhawk College to do computer repair, computer programming, network administration type stuff, but came to the conclusion it's more of a hobby than it would be, trying to do something in a corporate setting. But yeah, I was born here in Rock Island County, and this is pretty much my home. Even if I were to move somewhere else, chances are I'd probably come back here sooner or later.
And with all the time you spent on the road, how does it feel to come home and be back here?
Well, it's kind of give or take. It's like after about 4-6 weeks out on the road, you're scratching at the door to get out of that truck for a while. Then after about 2-3 days at home, you're scratching at the door of the truck to get back in.
Maybe describe our current route that we're on.
Well, next pickup is over in Columbus, Indiana. Currently, we're sitting over in Martinsville, Indiana, about roughly 50 miles away, give or take. GPS has it about an hour 5 to get over there, and I'll be dropping the empty and then grabbing a loaded trailer, and it has what they call a 2-stop on there. The first one's going to be in West Virginia, and then the final destination will be in Pennsylvania. How many forklifts are coming off at one point or the other, I don't know just yet. I'll have more information on that once I get a hold of the bill of lading, take a look at what's on there.
Switching topics, would you say driving a truck is in any way kind of like a moving canvas, and that you always have the same view here, but it's always shifting? Would you describe it all like moving canvas? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the best way I could put it is like each day is a different movie. You're sitting in the same theater, but something else is always rolling on the screen.
What do you think it is that attracts so many drivers to the profession? I think it's last I read there's something like 3.5 million, it's like 1% of the population or so. It seems like a large percentage of the U.S. population is attracted to this profession. Why do you think that is?
Some of it could be the opportunity to travel around the states and being paid for it. If you do the over the road stuff, one week you could be in California, the next week you're over in the Carolinas, next week you could be rolling around Texas. Then you have some folks that do the over the road for 2 years and then fetch a local job so they could be at home every night. Then you have some that, kind of a last ditch on finding work because everything else has kind of gone bottoms up. The place that they used to work for, they decided to close it down, send it to Mexico or China or somewhere else where they can get the labor for cheaper versus having an American do it. Others, it's just in the bloodline. Their father was a driver, or their uncle was a driver, and they got fascinated by it.
It's kind of a tradition.
Oh yeah. Currently, we're sitting over in Martinsville, Indiana, about roughly 50 miles away, give or take. GPS has it about an hour 5 to get over there. Of course, she's also figuring 60 miles an hour, the average. Traffic may, indicate something else, because right now it's about 5 o'clock and everyone's on that rush to get home, so
What are your thoughts on the myth of the American truck driver? Should start there. There seems to be a Western kind of influence. Do you think that's still around and part of the culture of truck driving?
Well, Bon Jovi once put it, on a steel horse I ride.
What are your thoughts on faith?
I'm more of a person of science. I was never a person of religion by any which means. I grew up watching Star Trek and a bunch of science fiction shows. Honestly, I learned more from watching those shows than the so-called good book.
Sure. Typically, people make their own chances. Everything's cause and effect, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I'd been a driver back in the 90s. You know, I graduated in 94. I wish I hadn't wasted time going to college and had gotten straight in a truck after that, after high school, because back then you could make money out here when fuel was $1 a gallon and the freight rates were relatively, compared to today, higher than they are today, because nowadays you got other companies that are, everybody's undercutting everybody else, and the culture was better back then too.
Used to be a brotherhood of drivers.
Yeah, and it's the like I said, that's the same way in just generally in culture in general. It's because people don't know their neighbors anymore. Everybody's getting kind of more for themselves and not being as amiable, friendly toward people as they used to be back in the day. And that's just culture in general, and definitely feel it a lot more in the truck driving industry.
Back in the day, if someone saw another driver on the side of the road with the hood up, they'd be calling out over the CB saying,
Hey driver, you okay? You need anything?
Yeah.
Well, nowadays nobody has CBs.
Well, I have one, but it's kind of quiet until there's a backup or something.
Really,
And,
has that died down since since both of you have been driving? Have you noticed that the CBs are becoming less and
Oh, yeah.
less?
Because everybody's got cell phones. I started driving in 03, and of course the cell phone revolution had already started by that time, but not nearly what it is these days.
Yeah.
And so back then, a lot of people still had CBs, but now, very few. The only people that have CBs now, to the most part, are people that need it for their particular job. Like last night, I was talking to these upstaging guys that haul staging equipment and stuff, and they have to have a CB because they park, when they've got 100 trucks parked and they're all getting unloaded, staging equipment unloaded and reloaded and stuff, they have to have everything. You have to be sitting in the truck listening to what's going on, and they call out which truck is coming in and getting unloaded and all that. And jobs like that, for especially also flatbeds that haul a bunch of coal and steel and stuff. A lot of those places still rely on CBs a lot. Most companies.
the place where I went, the last load I had where I picked up the styrofoam cups, you had to flip the radio to channel 12 just to get in the gate. And so there are still some shipper and receivers that you have to have the radio for. But not everyone has the radio.
How do you find that the phones have changed the industry, or how do they come into play when you're on the road?
Your whole life is on that phone right there.
Yeah.
I remember, like I said, I started in 03, and the phone revolution, people had phones by then, of course, but not, of course, near to the extent. And I remember as years went along and then the phones got more and more popular, and drivers started carrying phones and using phones more and more for work. I remember saying, I'm not going to get a darn phone for work. If my work wants me to have a phone, they can buy me a phone or they can pay my phone bill. And I remember saying that over and over and hearing many other drivers saying that. But today, you couldn't do this job if you didn't have a phone.
And they do speed some things up, like if you have the Weigh Your Truck app, you know, you're not having to jump inside the store to get the scale ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Then
There's so much convenience from it. Yeah, and back when you had, now of course nobody gets directions anymore. We all have GPSs, but when you do need to call a shipper or receiver or your work or you want to call family, back before cell phones, every truck stop had a bank of payphones, and every day you had a line of people that were standing there for 20, 30 hours sometimes, just to use one of those payphones, just so they can call home and say, "Hey, Mama, I'm still alive." And I can't imagine driving back then before cell phones, because, like I said, when I started, cell phones had already been around. I think the same for you. And so you need to call somebody, no problem. You drive on down the road. I never did that. I didn't say that. I don't do it. I don't drive and call. You don't do that. No. No, if you need to make a phone call, you just reach over, push a button, call home or whatever, or whoever you need to call. And you can drive down the road and have a little bit of a life, a little semblance of a life, being able to talk to your family, talk to friends, talk to whatever. Whereas before cell phones, I can't imagine. That's like medieval or something.
I'm going to send a postcard or something like that.
mentioned you're a man of science. You have faith in science. How does that fit into your value system, would you say?
Well, unlike religion, with science, if there's something that can be proven wrong, then everyone's willing to change their opinions or change their minds about it. With faith, it's basically, well, book says it, so, nothing can contradict it. Even if a few chapters or verses later does. Then it's like, well, what now?
What is it you find compelling about science?
Well, if it wasn't for science, we'd still be using horses to drag stuff around. It was science that, built the engine and the electronics. My cell phone, religion didn't come up with that. It took folks in white lab coats poking around and trial and error and figuring one thing or another out.
So if I hear you right, it sounds like you're saying science is an engine for progress?
Yeah. In the end, science is truth. Now, can it be wrong for a while? Sure. But as soon as something else comes along to say, hey, we've been doing this wrong for a while, and here's why, then everyone else is like, okay, that makes sense. With religion, it's not, it's far from that. I was just kind of wondering what's going on with the eastbound here. Is everything going down to one lane? They're getting stupid about merging again? Okay, westbound, you want to give me the 411 on what's going on eastbound?
You guys are going to be hours on that eastbound side.
We've been done sitting here for about close to an hour 20. Correction, about an hour 30 now.
Eastbound, if you got it on, you got a straight truck slipped over on the highway there. It's going to be a while before they get that mess cleaned up.
What interests you most about your work?
Every day's a bit different. Nothing's necessarily the same. I never know where I'm going to head to next. So there's that little bit of mystery and intrigue, if you will.
There's another wreck down here for eastbound, boy. Eastbound ain't got no luck tonight.
Driver, I'm up here at the 24 and all I see is brake lights.
Oh no, they got 5 cops who've got a 4-wheeler over there on the side right there in front of you guys. And up there on the 32, a westbound 6-wheeling furniture truck pulled over, did a flip on your side. He's got the whole road blocked up there. The 32.
Oh, joy.
your father was a driver as well. Does he ever ask you about life on the road, current environment? Do you ever swap stories about your time on the road?
Oh yeah, I tell him about, some of the goofy stuff that's going on, about the rules and regulations and how they've changed since he was since he was on the road. I told him if for some reason he managed to if he got healthy enough to get back into a truck, that he'd find so much had changed from the time he was in the truck himself. Told him probably the two biggest things he'd probably fight with the most would probably be the GPS and the e-log system, because in his days they had paper logs and that was it.
Can you talk about the truck as kind of a second home?
Pretty much, I'm living out of the truck for like 4 to 6 weeks at a time. So yeah, she ends up being like a second home for me. My cell phone acts as a TV. I have the radio for music, news, and depending on where I'm parked at, one hell of a view. Then of course got the sleeper, my bed, able to sit back, relax.
What keeps you up at night?
Oh. Sometimes I've had what I've dubbed rookie mares, nightmare situations for rookies, stuff like the brakes going out on me, feeling the truck move and thinking I didn't set the brakes. One of the more common nightmares is, like I said, the brakes not working, and I keep going forward and I'm about to slam into somebody, and in the dream I'm sitting there, I'm stomping on the brakes as hard as I can. I'm trying to pull on the emergency brakes. I'm hitting the Charlie valve, the brakes just for the trailer themselves, and the truck just is not stopping. And of course, all you can do is just snap awake, and you're looking around, and it's like finally hits you. It's it's just a nightmare.
So next question. What's that? Water boxes?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Weather Service in Jackson, Kentucky has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Powell County in east central Kentucky, southeastern Montgomery County in east central Kentucky.
That's
Estill
what's going
County
on around
in
us.
east central Kentucky, southwestern Menifee County in east central Kentucky.
So, Peter, what would you say something is that most people don't understand or get about trucking?
Probably that we have blind spots and we can't stop on a dime.
Do you find you run into issues with that a lot? A lot of drivers poor driving etiquette.
Yeah, they'll cut in front of me or they'll ride too close on the tail end of the truck here, essentially tailgating. Or if they do happen to get over into the left-hand lane, they just they sit there for a bit. Not sure if they want to try to pass or if they want to get back behind me.
And how common is that experienced drivers are just
Oh, it happens a lot.
What kind of things go through your head when you're sitting in silence?
Usually when I'm sitting here, there's always something going on in the head. Either I'm thinking about what I gotta do tomorrow, the delivery time, worrying about traffic, weather, trying to get the bills paid.
Talk if you could about the importance of semi-trucks to the nation.
The best way I could put it is us drivers, as truck drivers, we're like the red blood cells of this nation. The red blood cells provide oxygen, for the body, carry nutrients and so forth. Well, that's what us drivers do. If it wasn't for us, this country would come to a standstill within a few days. Shelves would be empty. Gas stations wouldn't have any fuel to sell. Manufacturers wouldn't have the parts needed, the raw materials. Roads wouldn't be getting fixed. We're pretty much number two when it comes down to importance. Number one being the military. They're essentially the white blood cells, if you will, protecting the country while we're doing everything else.
To that point, can you talk about the process of how goods go from creation, distribution, and eventually reach the consumer, and what role truck drivers play in that?
Truck drivers play a role in every single bit, or in every single step, from bringing the raw materials to the manufacturer, then taking the stuff from the manufacturer to the distribution center, then from the distribution centers to the store shelf.
How many miles do you think you've covered in your career?
I know I've closed in on 200,000 so far. Your average driver could hit it anywhere from 2,500 miles to 3,000 miles a week.
Yeah, I was doing some research, and the Earth is only 24,900 miles around, which means you travel enough distance to go around the globe several times. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It wouldn't surprise me.
say the most common vices for drivers on the road? Is there a common vice that you see on the road?
There's a lot of drivers that smoke. Probably the second biggest vice is coffee, you know. You'll see drivers have like a thermos, you know, nice sized one that they'll fill up with coffee to last them throughout the day. Smoking's kind of, you know, a lot of drivers smoke. And the golden land for us drivers that smoke is Missouri. Cheapest damn cigarettes we could get a hold of. Last time I was there, it was like $2.50 a pack. New York, it's like almost $10 a pack. A couple of spots in Chicago, it's $11 a pack. And what these damn politicians don't understand is you keep jacking the damn taxes up on the damn things. Folks are just going to either jump a state border to get them cheaper in the next state over, which living in the Quad Cities, that was kind of the deal for a while. You know, Illinois raised the taxes on cigarettes, so folks were jumping into Iowa for cigarettes. Iowa would raise their taxes, so folks, you know, the Iowa folks would jump into Illinois for cigarettes, and it was kind of this back and forth for a while. Except for folks down around Keokuk, because they were like right next door to Missouri, so when, you know, both Iowa and Illinois is like, hell with you guys, we'll go into Missouri.
So it seems like there used to be kind of this lore that drivers would take uppers to keep them up through the night as they were driving. I mean, that seems like it was before it was regulated, but do you find there was any truth to that back in the day and it changed? Is that still something that some drivers do?
It's kind of an old school deal with the drivers. I mean, of course, back at the time, they didn't really fully understand the, you know, that the speed or stuff like that would, you know, trash their system. They just didn't have that type of information at that time. Nowadays, you have drivers, and it's caffeine that they're chasing. You know, you have truck stops that have a case full of like Monsters, Rockstar, Red Bull, stuff that has a ton of caffeine in there. Then by the checkout, you'll have like these little packets called Stacker 3s, which is just basically a bunch of caffeine in a pill form. Usually about like 230 or 240 milligrams of caffeine in one shot.
Are you able to speak about your parents? What kind of role they play in your life?
Well, you know, I do what I can to help them out with the bills. You know, sending some money back home to cover one thing or another. The both of them's on SSI because, you know, my mother suffered from a stroke in '03. My father contracted MRSA, which weakened his heart. Made it to where he couldn't work at all himself. And their SSI covers, you know, enough to kind of get them by, but at the same time, they can't really get much of any help from, you know, the government because they, you know, the government claims that, well, they're making too much off of SSI for them to qualify for anything. And at times I can't help but, you know, to call bullshit on that. So I do what I can, you know, send my mother a couple of $100 here and there to cover for the bills. You know, every year when they get that cost of living increase for their SSI, it's kind of funny that the place that they live, suddenly the rent goes up by almost the exact same amount. So it's like, you know, even if they get a few extra bucks a year from the government for their SSI, you know, it's like they're getting kicked, you know, by the landlord himself because he wants to be a greedy bastard about it.
It sounds like you're doing what you can to help them out, either for them. How often do you find yourself talking to them? Do you have
I give my mother a call every day or every other day, or she's calling me, see where I'm at, what I'm up to, let me know how my dog's doing.
What kind of parallels do you see between your line of work as a truck driver and the old American West, the idea of the cowboy?
Well, with the cowboy, he's taking a herd of cattle across the plains there. And in my case, I'm sitting there hauling a bunch of freight across the same way.
And why do you think it is that a lot of truck drivers kind of relate to the cowboy as a figure?
Well, we're out here by ourselves and spending a long amount of time away from home, our loved ones, our family. And doing a job that, not a lot of folks are willing to take up or put up with. Because not everyone's, made out to be a driver. I mean, just like everyone's not made out to write computer code or be a lawyer. As goofy as it sounds, it takes a special breed to be a driver, especially doing the long haul stuff. Probably the worst bit about all of it's the loneliness.
And how do you find yourself dealing with loneliness on those long stretches?
Keeps the mind occupied. Listening to the radio, reading stuff online. Talk to other drivers when the radio's kind of chirping up. Call home, talk to the folks. Stuff along those lines.
The reference to Star Trek is interesting. The show takes place on a ship and exploring different parts of the galaxy. Do you see any parallels between kind of frontiers explored on that television series and traveling the country at all?
To some degree. You kind of joke around that each truck itself is its own little starship, having to get from one spot to another.
on the topic of GPS technology and how it's evolving, what are your thoughts on self-driving trucks?
If they really want to start pissing off drivers, that's one way to go. I mean, there's just too many problems with it in and of itself. Too many possibilities of that stuff having issues. One, is the general public going to like the ideal of a self-driving truck that has hazardous material on there? Whether it be explosives, something radioactive, something that, if water gets in there and it, causes a chain reaction, the public itself is not going to like that ideal one bit. They're going to demand that there has to be a driver in there. Two, who's going to put the fuel in there? Is the TA, petrol, and all that's going to have some attendant that'll run out, fill the truck, check the oil, make sure everything's, tires are inflated out as they should. The states ain't going to like it because now there goes their tax revenue because, they got no one to go and issue a ticket to. Three, the damn things are going to get hacked one way or another. Whether it be through a script kiddie, playing around with somebody, a couple of scripts, somebody's going to break into that damn system and cause the trucks, to do something stupid. Start ramming other cars. They've heard there's, what was it, BuzzFeed or Gizmodo, one of the two, they showed exactly what can happen. They had someone actually hack into the guy's car while he was driving and shut the car off and start goofing around with all the settings on there. And if one person could do that to a car, imagine an 80,000 pound vehicle. What chaos someone could cause doing that.
Your time is spent on the road versus on rest periods. So, what's the mandate there?
What are the rules?
What are the rules?
The rules are you can drive no more than 10 hours a day. No, 11 hours a day. I'm sorry. You can't drive any more than 11 hours a day. It has to be done in a 14-hour shift. In other words, from the time that you start your clock in the morning, you start doing your pre-trip inspection in the morning till the time you shut down in the afternoon or at night, all that has to be done within 14 hours. All your loading and unloading and fuel and rest stops and everything has to be done within 14 hours. Clock don't stop. Now that we're on computers, that clock don't stop. In the morning, you have to click on duty, say you're doing a pre-trip inspection, take 10 or 15 minutes for a pre-trip inspection before you actually start moving. The rule is you have to do one per day, a pre-trip or post-trip. But you have, from the time you start in the morning till the time you stop in the afternoon or in the evening, all that has to be done in 14 hours. Of that 14, you can't drive more than 11. So you can't work more than 14. You can't drive more than 11. All the hours are kind of confusing.
Essentially, we're working off of 5 clocks. You have your 70-hour clock, which states that you can't work more than 70 hours within an 8-day period. Mm-hmm. Then you have your 14-hour clock at your 11-hour driving. Then you have your 8-hour clock, which states that you have to take a 30-minute break before the end of the first 8 hours. Mm-hmm. Then you have your 10-hour rest break after either your 11 hours driving or your 14 hours expire, whichever one comes first.
Mm-hmm. So then if you stop for 34 hours consecutive, it resets everything.
Yep.
What can you tell me about the e-log system?
Oh, Jesus. strict little bastards, that's for sure. Essentially, it's a computerized stopwatch that, you know, you can edit on duty, off duty, sleeper, all you want. You can't touch the drive line. If for some reason there's an error on the drive line, I'd have to get a hold of the company to get them to change that over. And even then, it has to be for a damn good reason.
And with things like e-logs, where you're on kind of a stopwatch timer, do you feel some of the freedom has been taken out of being a professional driver?
Yeah, not being able to edit that drive line, you know.
You mentioned early on when we were talking in response to one of the questions.
Kind of like
how
that.
would you describe truck driving in one sentence? I believe your response was how you take something as simple as truck driving and screw it up.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the best way I could sum up trucking in one sentence is how can we take something as simple as moving stuff from point A to point B and screw it up as much as possible. You know, in the end, that's pretty much what trucking is, moving stuff from point A to point B, and it should be rather simple. But you have states that's like, you know, okay, that's over 80,000 pounds, you need a permit to do, you know, to move it across our state. And then on top of that, you can only drive between this hour and this hour, or during the daylight hours. You know, this is overlength, so you're going to need, you know, a permit for that.
And it sounds like each state has their own regulations in the books. I think it would help to have more of a
The states,
federal system for driving nationally.
it should come down to where the states should be talking to one another to simplify the rule sets versus having, you know, mind you, I'm excluding Alaska and Hawaii because they're their own little, you know, deals. But it should be, you know, right now you have 48 states with 48 different set of rules, and then the federal government on top of that. And I don't know of any driver out there that knows every single rule on the federal plus the states. You know, and what should be is the states should be yapping with one another. The states should have a general agreement between them saying, okay, we have this rule, you have this rule. We should try to come to like a general middle ground on it, just to make it simpler. You know, it shouldn't be 48 states with 48 different deals, like with the CDL test itself. You know, Iowa may have you do, you know, alleyway backing, while Illinois may have you do parallel parking. Iowa may charge $46 for the CDL. Illinois wants to charge $125. That makes no sense.
How does it feel to be constantly in motion? Do you think about that much?
Well, it does kind of take a toll on you when you head home for a few days. You know, you kind of suffer from what they call road lag. And it just, for a bit there, you're just not used to just standing still for a little bit. The body kind of feels like it's still moving forward. It takes about at least a little while to get past that, about 12, 15 hours. Usually once I get home, I'm usually out like a light for a while, kind of rest up real hard.
What do you say is the best part about living in this country?
supposed to be freedom, but when you look at it, we've kind of lost that over the years. From regulations to different laws that keeps getting passed. It's kind of hard to say, what's the best thing about living in this country. Because anymore, it's just we strayed from what the Constitution said. From the civil rights that we're supposed to have.
And how do you think that happened? Why do you think that happened?
Part of it's the wrong people being put into positions to make the changes without any necessary checks. And then the courts not really doing what they're supposed to, or ignoring what they should be doing. The Chief Justices of the Supreme Court, they're supposed to be neutral in their power. They're supposed to look at the law and say whether it's constitutional or not. However, because you have individuals that's been placed on the court that's either far right or far left, the laws are so imbalanced it's beyond belief. And then on top of that, we have so many people in jail or prison for some of the dumbest of damn things. A lot of them are in there just because, they smoked a plant. Because they had marijuana on them or, some mushrooms. When in reality, we ought to be treating drug addiction should be more like a mental issue than a criminal issue.
I think that sounds like that comes down to individual freedoms too, like how some of the freedoms have been taken away as government seems to be regulating more and more of what we do with our lives.
Yeah. And you can see the same thing in the trucking industry from the hours of service on down. There's quite a few drivers that believe that really we should be allowed to drive until we feel that we're tired. If I want to sit there and drive for 10 hours and take a 5-hour break and then hop in, drive for another 3 hours, should be more than able to. They ought to have it set up to where, if you caused an accident because you were drowsy, then you're responsible for that accident. I mean, as they have it right now, it's basically a one-size-fits-all, and all of us drivers ain't one-size-fits-all. Some of us can get away with only 5 hours of sleep a day. Some of us need 8. But unfortunately, we have to kind of work within this rat maze.
life on the road?
Not easy. If you're single, it's awesome. You're married, not easy.
My wife and I got married, and we went on the road right away together. So we were on the road together for the first 2.5 years, or 3 years I've been on it. And that was a lot of fun. That truck got real small.
Was she still go out in the truck with you, or
No. She drove part of that time, so
you still together?
yeah.
Oh, bless your hearts.
Now she's not. Well, I went to a different account, so I can't have a passenger and I can't have a dog.
Oh,
And with things like with some of these companies trying to add the self-driving technology, with things like e-logs, GPS, do you feel in some sense that these companies are trying to automate the jobs for you, or automate the job in some sense?
they're making the jobs easier for the company drivers.
They're making it easier.
They're making it easier. All they want them to, I'm no disrespect to you, but they want to make the driver have at least littlest problems of not having to worry about timing and all that. All they have to do is punch a button. The companies in their corporate office on the computer there, they'll manage their employees' time. They get the maximum efficiency out of their employees.
Where they can fuel, which routes that they can take.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, years ago, you could stop any company out there, CRST, Swift, England, whatever. You could stop anywhere you wanted and fuel wherever you wanted at. Now they got companies out there telling their drivers, don't fuel here, fuel here, and only put 200 gallons in, or put 75 gallons in. But no, the truck stops are hurting because there's nobody coming in. Like on a Friday night, I'm talking maybe 10, maybe 15 years ago, you couldn't find a seat on here on a Friday night. You couldn't find a damn seat. Those seats were all packed in, and those seats over there, out there, watching TV out there, the TV room would be packed. They're hurting.
Why is it that they're hurting? Are you worried about the profession in any way?
No, it's always going to be here. Everything you eat, feel, touch, or wear has been on a truck in one way or another.
Yep.
The shirt that you have on, the jeans you have on, the shoes you have on, it's been on a truck. No, I ain't worried about it.
Like a doctor. You're always going to need a doctor.
What I am worried about is the large 7 companies are going to push the little guy out like me out of the business. That's what I'm worried about. And it's slowly happening.
So how concerned are you about automation and self-driving technologies?
Well, is it right around the corner? No. 20 years down the line, possibility. But they're still going to have a lot of issues that they're going to have to try to figure out. You know, one of the other ones I can think of off the top of my head, you know, who's going to go in and get the bills? You know, sign for the bills to take ownership of the load until it reaches its final destination. You know, and then on top of that, if that technology were to take over, you'd have millions upon millions of drivers out of work. For what? You know, just to save the mega corporations money. You know, instead of having to pay a driver, you know, $50,000-$60,000 a year, they get the CEO gets to pocket that.
I've seen that some companies are experimenting and developing technology, not unlike drone pilots, where the driver would be behind the wheel of a virtual system at a home office. Have you seen anything like that? And what are your thoughts on that type of technology? Is that worthwhile, or is that?
I've not really heard of that. I have heard of what they call platooning, which you have one truck sitting up front, and then about another 2 or 3 trucks sitting behind it, following right along. However, as one driver has pointed out, that sounds like a convoy, and supposedly a convoy was illegal, which I can never understand why the hell a convoy of trucks in the first place was illegal. However, there are some drivers under certain situations, whether it's legal or not, they'll say to hell with it and do it anyways. Case in point, about a couple of months back, there was a 5-year-old boy that got killed in a house fire, and he loved trucks. He loved semis, and as a kind of a final send-off, if you will, they placed his casket on the back of one of the semis, and went from the funeral home to the graveyard where he was going to be, laid to rest. And following behind him was at least 30 trucks, and either with or without trailers, but all of them followed him, as a means of support. That's one of those few cases where it's like, that shows how much heart, we drivers have.
So there's still an element to that brotherhood.
Yeah, and there's a lot. There's quite a few drivers that was in there that they're like, the hell with my current load at the second. That's a little more important, and like I said, that shows the type of heart that some of us drivers still have. Me, had I been in the area, I would have tagged along.
Are there any hidden or secret gems out there hiding in the American landscape?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of them that's out there. One of my favorites is over by Dead Man's Pass up in Oregon off of 84. As you're heading down the hillside there, they have this little pull-out area where either you can put on chains or you can just kind of park there for the night. And if you happen to stop there during the night, there's no clouds out and the moon's not out that night, and you can see stars from one side all the way to the other, and it's just beautiful. And on top of that, they don't have any street lights there, so you have no light pollution. So you just pull in, shut the truck off, shut all the lights off, hop out, wait about a good 5-10 minutes, let your eyes adjust to the darkness, and you just see every star possible at night, and it's just beautiful. During the daytime, you could just see for miles and upon miles out from there.
What are some of the most endearing images you can recall from your time on the road?
Endearing images?
Yeah, something that sticks with you.
There's been a couple of different cases. One started off with kind of a double accident on the rookie's part, but pulling into the fuel, trying to pull up to the fuel island at a pilot, and didn't hit the brakes fast enough. He hit the driver in front of him and hopped out. You could see that the one he hit was rather upset, and rightfully so. And the one that hit him, he was upset, about hitting him, apologizing and everything. Gets back into his truck, tries to back up, hits another driver. So he has like 2 different accidents within a matter of a few seconds. He hops out, and it's obvious, the rookie there, he's just kind of bawling his ass off about, thinking he's, a severe screw up at this point. And the second driver he hit, it's like, yeah, he wanted to be pissed, but he's sitting there looking at this other driver, and he's like, he just goes up and hugs the driver. He's like, okay, we've all had these types of bad days. It's all right. No one's being killed. Just a little property damage.
What brings you peace and fulfillment?
Just being in the truck. For a while there, I got knocked out of the truck for a while because of a heart issue. And for those 3 months, it was kind of miserable. I just kind of woke up, poked around online, and it just went back to sleep. And it's just, the depression kind of kicks in for a while. And you're trying to figure out, well, if I can't drive, what the hell else can I do? Go back to college, try to get a degree, maybe, try to pick up on the computer work, do odd jobs, something to try to survive. And then once I got the go-ahead to jump back into the truck, kind of back in my natural environment, if you will.